multi-domain operations. Yesterday's session provided us with a clear understanding about the evolution of the concept of multi-domain operations, its requirements, and the options available with the Indian Defence Forces. This was followed by a visualization of the concept of NDO from the land and maritime perspective. Over a period of 4 months, personnel of the Indian Defence Forces have provided over 100 service papers on curated topics related to NDO. These service papers have been evaluated, and the best 6 papers have been selected to be presented here today. In today's sessions, we will first examine the intricacies of doctrinal adaptation and training for NDO, followed by additional concepts pertaining to reimagining operational art for NDO. May I now request the chair for the first session, Vice Admiral A. Pramod, Ativshi Seva Medal, Youth Seva Medal, Director General, Naval Operations, to please occupy the seat on the stage. Vice Admiral A. Pramod has held 3 appointments at Directorates of Naval Air Staff and Aircraft Acquisition. The Admiral has also collected the appointments of Deputy Commandant, Indian Naval Academy, Assistant Chief of Naval Staff, Air, and Flag Officer Commanding, Maharashtra Naval Area. I now request the speakers for this session to occupy their seats on the stage. The first speaker for this session is Group Captain S.P. Singh, PhD, who has submitted his paper on doctrinal adaptation and training. Group Captain S.P. Singh is a Cat A NSC and is currently posted as DS at College of Air Warfare. He will be covering his talk on NDO versus Journalness, Doctrinal Nuances. The second speaker, Commander Hushan Razak, has submitted his paper on simulation and wargaming infra for NDO. Commander Razak is a delivery specialist and is currently posted as DS at the Naval War College. He will be covering his talk on wargaming and simulation for NDO. The last speaker for the session is Colonel Ankush Goyal, who has submitted his paper on civil military infra and interagency collaboration. The Colonel is a signals officer and is presently posted as Colonel Network for Spectrum at Integrated Headquarters of Ministry of Defence Army. He will be bringing up the need for civil military fusion for NDO in cognitive domain in his talk. Now I request the chair to take over for further proceedings of the session.
May I have your permission to start the proceedings? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. During the SAMWAD proceedings yesterday, the audience had a fairly good insight into the evolution and key tenets of multi-domain operations. Just to recapitulate, NDO is an evolving concept. It refers to the coordinated, integrated, and synchronized employment of military forces and non-military national capabilities across land, sea, air, cyber, space, and cognitive domain. The key attributes of NDO being the ability to operate in all domains with advanced interoperability, high intensity, simultaneous, standoff, and precision strike capabilities, capitalizing on the high-end technology. Advanced space-based C4ISR capabilities, information, net-centric, and data infrastructure for linked ISR governance and degrading command and control infrastructure. Autonomous systems, AI, data analytics, and automation compressing the ISR decision-making and AI-enabled kill chains. NDO as an operational concept was conceived by the US in 2015 to address Russian threat to NATO and Baltic states post the annexation of Crimea and siege of Ukraine Donbas region in 2014-15, and also to counter increasingly assertive posture by China in the South China Sea. It was conceptualized to counter main adversaries Russia and China, acquiring advanced capabilities of A2AD and A2AD strategy, which challenged the US military domain across all operating environments, which restricted the freedom of maneuver for US forces across all domains. Somebody may pose a question that how it is different from RMA introduced in the 1980s, late 1980s and 90s during Gulf War I in 1991 and in the following conflicts. What has changed? In my view, the ability to undertake high intensity, precision and high impact operations in a shorter time frame, advent of the technology to disrupt the digital infrastructure which was not there earlier, case in point is Stockless and the NotPetya attacks, and the ability of China to attack space-based assets, the perceived deep influence of cognitive warfare onto the operations, the employment of uncrewed assets, thus giving us an option to minimize human losses during operations, are the key driving factors for designing the MDO concept. To talk about the nuances of MDO vis-a-vis the joint operations, unlike the joint operations which we were shaping up, and that's why our organizations are coming, where the primary focus is on coordination and integration, integrated ops by the services, MDO as a concept concentrates mainly on the warfighting design aspects towards conduct of simultaneous, kinetic and non-kinetic actions across all the domains. As we have realized, MDO is a technology-dominant concept and therefore need a technocentric approach. MDO may necessitate military personnel to think and act with a cross-domain mindset, know how the various domains interact, and develop skills in synchronizing military and non-military actions. This may entail review or tweaking the existing organization structures and the training curriculum, with an impetus on common operating picture and joint command and control structure to integrate systems and synchronize multi-domain operations, more exercises, experimentations, simulations, and tabletop exercises at the joint ops level need to be conducted utilizing all advanced training techniques. In the next hour or so, the speakers for this session will present the nuances of MDO, wargaming and simulation aspects, and the civil-military synergy in cognitive domain. May I now request the first speaker, Group Captain Sri Prakash Singh, to deliver his talk. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Chair, Headquarter IDS and the Indian Air Force for giving me this opportunity to speak on topic jointness and multi-domain operations, a critical analysis of doctrinal and training imperative. Before I start a disclaimer, all views expressed here are personal. This does not belong to any organization or establishment. This is based, analytical inferences is based on the practitioners and academician know-how. This historical SAMWAD was for protecting righteousness based on the merit of matter. And in the same way, I will endeavor to speak candidly, free from service biases and rhetoric. I shall be covering my talk under three broad sections. First, I shall be analyzing multi-domain operations vis-a-vis jointness. Thereafter, I will discuss on MDO with a redefined vision of multi-domain, multi-level. And before I flash my policy recommendations, I shall touch upon the implementation timelines. We recently witnessed ops in which can be considered as a case study with numerous positivities to it. And as has been narrated in many times, that although primarily an air war, this was the first declared tri-services military response joint operations will not only spread over the adversary's geographical depth, but also a well-calibrated mix of perimeter and defense at the same time. Despite the success of Doctrinal, further deliberation is needed on the related yet distinct concept of jointness and embryo. We need to appreciate that while often used interchangeably, they represent different stages of the operational construct. We are well aware of what jointness means in a classical sense. However, I will focus on what jointness in practice is. In practice, jointness has often been mixed with administrative and symbolic integration. Joint education, logistics, maintenance, transport, procurement, and support frameworks are frequently claimed as evidence of progress. While these measures are necessary and beneficial, they remain administrative enablers for routine management rather than indicators of operational jointness. They improve efficiency and reduce duplication, but do not address how combat power is planned, commanded, controlled, and employed in conflict. At best, such measures create a foundation. At worst, they generate an illusion of progress while leaving operational fault lines intact. True jointness is tested only in the operational domain. Persistent debates over control of air defense operations, ownership, employment of aerial assets, intelligence sharing, common planning processes, etc. indicate that jointness remains unresolved, especially at the operational and tactical level. Despite reforms, C2 architecture for planning and operations remains predominantly service-centric and has been the case with non-ratification of Joint Services Study Group on air defense till date. This reality defines the baseline from which the more advanced concept of MDO must be assessed in our scenario. There are existing institutional joint operational structures. Despite decades of existence, the services have yet to achieve the desired operational coherence. Operational experiences indicate that the structure remains effective. However, it requires substantial strengthening rather than restructuring. Existing joint PME between the services right from training days till nearly 3 decades definitely ensures 100% of individual familiarity. But we have to assess ourselves for the operational institutional jointness. Ladies and gentlemen, as the saying goes, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and so does this image. At the same time, it also remains open to interpretation, often shaped by individual convenience of overreaching to other domains, creating a perception of your sex can be my line. The bottom line we must internalize is that MDO and the various names is all about methodical participation, not the ownership, with a singular purpose to impose a simultaneous dilemma on the adversary. Now I shall move on to the doctrinal analysis. The Joint Doctrine of Indian Armed Forces 2017 represented India's first formal articulation of joint military thought in the open domain. While it did not explicitly address MDO, it acknowledged space, cyber, and special operations as part of the modern conflict environment. The subsequent joint training doctrine, prepared in a collegiate manner, aimed to promote integration and serve as a trans-services foundation and knowledge base. Nevertheless, these initiatives have translated into fully integrated operational processes or command structures. And service-specific doctrines further illustrate this doctrinal fragmentation. These doctrines collectively reveal the existence of multi-domain concepts, albeit through service-specific perspectives. Post-creation of the DMA, there has been a transition from broad conceptual jointness doctrines to more specialized concept, including MDO, which to my mind is an appropriate step in the right direction. While further arguments are aligned to the preface of the said doctrine, the Joint Doctrine for MDO, released at SAMWAD 2025, offers a common framework for cross-domain integration with 6 domain construct. It also formally acknowledged cognitive effect as operationally significant. Although the doctrine marks an important doctrinal advance and outlines key characteristics, structures, and future pathways, its inclusion of cognitive domain and emphasis on whole-of-nation approach remain largely aspirational concepts that require reasoned dialogue and considered deliberations. A domain of warfare has a precise operational definition creation of a distinctive and bounded environment in which military forces can be employed, maneuvered, contested, and controlled to achieve military objectives. Land, sea, air, and space meet these criteria. Control within these domains are observable, contestable, and accessible through outcomes such as territorial gain, sea control, air superiority, or space denial. In contrast, the cognitive and cyber construct fail to meet this foundational criteria and should not be equated with a classical war-fighting domain. Cognition is not an environment, but an internal human process shaped by psychology, culture, leadership, military, and social context. It has no independent existence, no terrain, no defensible or seizable boundaries. Military forces cannot maneuver with cognition, and neither can cognitive control be established in a deterministic manner. Cognitive effects such as morale, perception, decision-making, etc. are the outcomes of military operations conducted in a recognized environment and not battle space themselves. Therefore, treating cognition as a domain confuses influence with maneuver and effect with terrain. Cyber, while more tangible than cognition, also differs fundamentally from a classical war-fighting domain. Though recognized as an operational domain by the United States, it cannot be occupied or held in a traditional military sense. Cyber is therefore more accurately to be understood as an operational vector or capability set or function rather than a standalone domain of warfare. While whole-of-nation approach is desirable and reflects the contemporary character of conflict, it is executable only if the military instrument achieves the internal coherence through the whole-of-service approach as a prerequisite, that is WOSA. WOSA addresses the foundational challenge of making inter- and intra-services jointness and integration work. Without resolving service-centric themes, expecting effective national-level integration is operationally unrealistic. Doctrinally, WOSA constitutes the operational foundation, while WONA is its strategic extension, and reversing this sequence will definitely weaken execution. So to sum up the section, the image presents physical domains of warfare, that is land, sea, air, and space. The subsurface, that is undersea domain, has received very limited attention in the Western discourse and is therefore yet to gain a wider global recognition. The time is not far when the subsurface will also find a prominent place in warfare literatures. These domains constitute the primary battle space and are predominantly the responsibility of services. Effective MDO therefore hinges on the synergized employment of WOSA, ensuring unity of effort across all domains. Covering these domains are the three key cross-cutting functions as depicted in the center column. While these services play a critical role in many of these areas, their effective employment, particularly in the information, cognitive, and diplomatic space, requires WONA. Domains and functions combine in their effort across various zones and conflict and competition as depicted to the right. Their players are a mix of military and non-military entities. Moving on to section 2. MDO in some form or other has always existed and is not a new phenomenon. However, its formal articulation articulated by Chair, it was by the United States in 2015 and articulated through a doctrine in 2018. But this brought the renewed doctrinal and academic traction globally. The concept was primarily delivered to counter Russia and China and likewise. However, it has not taken off as desired in this doctrine. Without being constrained by the US concept, MDO remains conceptually incomplete unless expanded into a synergized, multi-domain, multi-level warfare framework to be truly future-ready in our context. It may therefore be redefined as MDO-ML or MDML. The subsequent argument of mine are derived from this very hypothesis. Effective adoption of entailable demands and Indianized doctrinal reorientation enabled through balanced transformation across four foundational pillars. Independent, ops and tech approach must convert into tech-infused operational capability. Training and HR, doctrine, and the cognitive, as depicted. The essence of MDML warfare lies in the convergence and not
Such conversions can be built by adapting the best practices, such as IF's command air tasking and strike planning for alien warfare, that's corporate work. Creating analogous army and navy planning cells, such as command air navy tasking and strike planning for joint warfare, will be beneficial. These cells can plan and execute inter-service wargaming quadrimestrally to proactively mitigate friction, duplication, conflict, and casualties during execution of naval warfare. Rather than reinventing structures, leveraging time-tested mechanisms from each services as best practices can strengthen joint operational capability. The IF evolution from MATGIS to RECCS has already transformed the orchestration of air operations. Such systems should not remain service silos, but evolve in what I call as silo of excellence, enabling plug-and-play convergence by other services to achieve integrated MDML warfare through a common all-domain operational picture. Though these services may have their procurement wish list, a basic yet extremely effective template could be derived from simple detection, identification, interception, and destruction template aligned with sensor-to-shooter loop, as everything else warfare is practically subsumed under this broad model. MDML warfare with net-centric capability is an inevitable necessity, with air and space domain being common to all other domains. This scenario requires identifying and acquiring the assets, systems, architectures necessary to deliver D2D or STS at scale to build up the operational capacity. Indicated image provides a pictorial representation of the likely key assets that require central procurement. The effective naval warfare requires a mandatory convergence of the communication grade and voice, data, video architecture for inter-domain communication. However, this image illustrates the current practical status of services in C2 capability. Globally, it has risen from analog C2 to digital C7 ISR and slowly graduating to quantum and AI embedded into it. While India aspires to become C5 ISR, services have yet not been able to bridge gap amongst themselves, which remains the biggest roadblock in the operational concept of India. Doctrinal tenets on air defense operations have been influenced by competing perspectives to claim ownership, causing uncertainty and chaos to the extent of challenging the Union War Book. To compound this tyranny, the rapid expansion of US and counter-US systems and self-designated airspace ownership at extremely low level, tactical level, have increased airspace deconfliction, jamming, and fratricide hazard. This scenario requires a formal drone airspace management cell in the counter-US grid with multiple units from the services and civil agencies for coordinated and, most importantly, disciplined operations on the lines of Civil Defense Control Center. Existing efforts at the staff command and higher command levels for wargaming and simulation require a refreshed perspective and periodic updates to remain relevant amidst rapid technological change and an increasingly complex threat environment. With this, I leave to the next speaker to elaborate. Moving on to the second and third pillar, ladies and gentlemen, training, HR, and doctrine are deeply interrelated. Much like the fusion of operations and technology, these elements must also be fully enmeshed to enable meaningful MDML warfare, particularly with respect to the emerging domains and functions. It is paradoxical that the organization wants to be a highly competitive and future-ready force. However, most of its newer domains and functions are staffed by individuals who are otherwise deemed unsuitable for the mainstream roles. Net result is that these workforces either don't deliver as desired, or when they bring credibility to the domains and functions, there is no career progression for them. Therefore, a fresh look is necessary to realign organizational needs with human aspiration, as this dichotomy will not achieve the organizational objective. This dilemma is not a peripheral issue, it is a core HR challenge that demands a closed-door, open-minded, realistic, and empathetic deliberations. Of late, there has been a race for MOU with state agencies and academia by the services. While comprehensive data is not publicly available, the number of active MOUs are likely substantial.
Whether these interactions result in quantifiable and qualitative institutional results that go beyond personal gains needs examination. To address this, the committed, impartial, bipartisan Indian National Defence University is desperately needed to plan, execute, and simplify critical military requirements at the strategic and operational level, along with offering a layered PAB to the services. There has been a push for Diplo-Commander idea, which is directionally correct, but MDML warfare will ultimately be delivered by the competence at the cutting edge. So the tech competence has to be built bottom-up and not driven top-down through rhetoric. We need to urgently relook at the induction, training, and skill development to shape a true techno-competent. The idea of centralized command, distributed control, and decentralized execution is not new. It has been articulated repeatedly in our doctrines and discussions and is a sound operational philosophy. But despite that, it hasn't been fully internalized, institutionalized, or consistently practiced across services and often gets diluted under the under-command mindset. Another key issue is our deeply ingrained service-centric mindset. It is hard to change and undermine joint warfighting and doctrinal growth. It further gets diluted by repeating shallow and incorrect lessons and perceived indoctrination with no professional justification. For example, calling Air Force and Air Arm even in 2025 or using vague terms just to claim relevance only creates confusion, increases the risk of fratricide, and leads to battle space anarchy. Similarly, fancy terms like non-contact warfare sounds impressive, but need proper understanding because air power engages a target through electronic means well before visual contact. The idea of unified air defense is also often misunderstood. Please remember, air defense has always been unified in principle. What we really need is a proper integration for seamless air control and reporting system adhering to the principle of unity of command. Positional non-compliance cannot be used as a justification for doctrinal reinvention. For MDML warfare to function, it requires a serious brainstorming behind closed doors, otherwise it will remain merely aspirational and potentially detrimental. We will all have to fundamentally understand and appreciate that joint military warfare cannot be undertaken on varied perception. For successful warfare, 6 is 6 and 9 will remain 9. Future and even current warfare is being shaped by invisible domains that create visible effect on the ground, requiring training and doctrine to internalize invisibility and verticality as core concepts. Air, space, and subsurface operation will increasingly shape outcomes, while land and sea domains will primarily serve territorial control and defense. Recognizing and institutionalizing this shift early is critical for effective MDML warfare. Sindoor validates the strategic shift from visible to invisible domains of battlespace, as can be gleaned from the visual effects on ground, where information, invisibility, and precision mattered more than physical occupation. Since independence, the services have largely planned and fought wars through service-centric approaches. In modern warfare, such mindset must converge to enable MDML warfare. The most critical requirement is a general transformation of mindset. Despite the defense reform and practice post-Cargill review in 2000 and 5 years since creation of DAY in 2019, progress on practice has been limited. The primary reason is not operational or administrative, but rather a lack of mindset transformation. Cognitive change is therefore fundamental to MDML warfare, as true convergence depend more on mindset and trust than on organizational structures alone. There is a need for dedicated, neutral, progressive, new thinking, not thinkers along, free from service biases as a prerequisite for achieving meaningful cross-domain rightness and true integration. Lastly, services have a peculiar template for drawing implementation strategies with short, mid, and long-term goals spread over decades. To my mind, unfortunately, today neither the RAF nor the Army and the Navy can afford to follow this template, especially for an unforeseeable long-term goals, keeping our militaries in mind. Services cannot wait for the target of 2047 to be fully transformed and as envisioned in the Defense Vision 2047 released on 10th March. We will have to seriously ingrain in our operational planning and procurement guidelines to set the target of Mission 2032 as a landmark deadline aligned with the centenary year of the IAF. else is enough to transform, provided we switch that of mindset to the best part. So to sum up, ladies and gentlemen, each issue I have touched upon deserves a deeper dialogue and discussion for SAMWAD se Samadhan. And keeping the time constant, I have kept the analysis as broad as possible. And these are the key policy recommendations for your recap. With that, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. S.P. Singh. You all will agree that Captain S.P. Singh has presented a well-researched service paper on doctrinal nuances of MDO, especially the doctrine of convergence. He has also introduced a few interesting but debatable aspects related to space, cognitive, and the cyber not being a means of war fighting. It's a warfare. And I have not read anywhere the introduction of subsurface domain. If you go to the literature aspects and read about the maritime domain includes the medium above, medium under, including over the sea and the littorals. There is an overlap between land, air, and in the littorals. So this understanding has to be there. With this, may I now request the next speaker, Commander Raza, to present on the topic wargaming and simulation for MGO.
Good morning, distinguished dignitaries, respected colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. In the next 20 minutes, I will present a paper on simulation and wargaming infrastructure for multi-domain operations. The paper draws and builds upon the ideas from open source international research papers, emerging military applications, and Indian Navy's ongoing work in this domain. In an era of escalating geopolitical tensions along India's extensive borders, from our land frontiers to the expansive Indo-Ocean region, modern warfare demands far more than conventional military strength. It requires the orchestration of synchronized effects across land, sea, air, space, cyber, and the cognitive domain. Central to multi-domain operation is decision superiority, the capacity to perceive, decide, and execute with greater agility and unity than the adversary. As the PLA integrates artificial intelligence into its operational paradigms, and the United States advances deep technology into conflict zones and to its synthetic training environment, our defense forces face an imperative to bridge emerging cognitive gaps. Traditional wargaming, while essential for doctrinal development and professional education, is inadequate to capture the intricacies of contemporary conflicts, which involves network surveillance, precision strikes, disrupted supply chains, hybrid threats, and pervasive information operations. The nature of these challenges can be distinct into 5 critical areas: compressed decision cycles that demand faster responses, cross-domain engagements where action in one domain ripple across others, resilient logistics under contested conditions, integrated ISR for a coherent operational picture, and cognitive adaptability amid ambiguity. These dynamics call for interoperable, scalable, and simulation frameworks that enable rigorous analysis and rehearsals without the exorbitant cost, risk, or logistic demands of live exercises. This paper advocates for Indian Defence Forces development of a nationally scalable, live, virtual, constructive simulation ecosystem underpinned by 3 pillars: a federated architecture for interoperability, governed data fabric for institutional knowledge, and a bounded AI augmentation for enhanced decision making. innovation, and critically uphold human command authority at every stage. Building on indigenous technology integration and inter-services collaboration, it positions simulation as a force multiplier for our armed forces. At the heart of this framework lies a modular 4-layer reference architecture designed for a unique operation context. At the base layer 1, the LVC layer runs the synthetic pattern. AI-driven AD conducts, engagements, injects, and multi-agent scenarios within the unified synthetic battle space are generated here. Layer 2, the federation layer, connects the three services. It uses high-level architecture and distributed interactive simulations, protocols, and standards. It links Army, Navy, Air Force simulators, enabling real-time data exchange without compromising service continuity. Layer 3, the national data fabric, governs, stores, and learns from data. It manages version scenarios, databases, terrain models, event logs, and AI output, supporting traceable after-action reviews and institutional learning. Layer 4, the AI services layer, advises the commander. It provides modular tools like post-action generation, adversary modeling, logistic optimization, and doctrinal insights. It is bounded by transparency and auditability. And most importantly, AI augmentation is never planned to replace command authority. A staged approach for AI inclusion is essential for building calibrated trust. This framework safeguards human dominance while progressively leveraging AI for efficiency. Phase 1, which is ongoing, is the baseline, human versus human. Phase 2, targeted by end of 2027, introduces AI assistance to human players. Phase 3, by end 2028, moves to supervised human versus AI confrontations. And Phase 4, by 2030, enables experimental AI versus AI simulations where humans analyze the outcome of the war games played out by AI agents at speeds unimaginable by human players. We now examine each of the 4 LVC architecture layers in detail, beginning with layer 1, the LVC construct. The foundational LVC layer focuses on efficient simulation of 3 independent segments enabled with AI modules. This slide will illustrate the LVC construct in the maritime domain, fusing all 3 proposed segments into one realistic battle space. Concepts shown are equally applicable for all the 3 services. In the live element, a small number of real ships, submarines, and aircraft operate at sea with their actual radars and sensors switched on. This live layer is essential as the real sea state, fatigue, and electromagnetic environment cannot be perfectly replicated in simulators. Perhaps only 4 to 5 ships actually sail, and the remainder train from harbor-based simulators. In the virtual segment, crews train in high-fidelity shore-based simulators from maritime warfare centers, maritime operations centers, and naval corporates, and also from ships' combat management systems in simulation mode. All simulation environment would be modified to the live feed data from units at sea for realism. The constructive layer is a unique proposal. Instead of human players simulating a red force, AI modules generate adaptive adversaries, inject threats directly into the combat management system of the naval units and maritime wargame centers. The critical advantage would be that every single Blue Force unit is available to the Blue Force commander for training and operational rehearsal. And no blue assets are diverted to play the adversary. This is what enables us to train the way we fight and fight the way we train. A similar LVC construct is recommended for Indian Army and Indian Air Force as well. The proposed architecture is service agnostic by design and can be easily adapted for individual service systems. LBC simulation training is fundamentally different from current system-based or multiplayer wargaming. Wargaming software runs purely on a computer with no real assets moving, whereas the proposed LBC concept incorporates live deployments, full utilization of blue assets as per actual orbit, and AI-driven constructive segment for it and neutral forces. The recommended phases of development are shown. In the initial phase, all units by Nintendo system from harbor. Using shore-based simulators from establishment and from ships combat management systems. In phase 2, limited units deployed at sea connect into the simulation network along with other units and wargame centers in harbor. This phase would require a robust satellite data link for seamless connection with units at sea. In phase 3, the system achieves additional capability to handle the entire blue force and assets at sea and harbor, a truly persistent, scalable training environment. This construct offers compelling operational advantages. I will elaborate further using a maritime scenario where a naval task group is deployed to deal with the contingency. The deployed units, while on transit, can wargame the op plan with headquarters support for exact scenario as they approach their area of operation. Also, both ships at sea and alongside harbor can simultaneously simulate to any other area of operations while continuing with their patrol duties or ongoing tasks. We now move to layer 2, the federation layer. This is the foundational technical backbone of any true LEC system. Federation connects independent systems via common standards, enabling data sharing without centralization. Each service retains its own systems and autonomy. However, through federated protocol, they can work together seamlessly in a shared synthetic battle space and transform separate service simulators into unified training capability. Without this layer, we only have decentralized systems with no standard data format, no guaranteed interoperability, and no joint operation reliability. This slide illustrates the federated architecture in practice. In the future, the proposed National Wargaming and Data Center (NWDC) planned to be set up under the aegis of Future Operations and Analysis Group at H2 Ideas is recommended be designed ground up with LBC architecture for seamless connection with all other services. Layer 3 is a national data fabric. The proposed concept is built over Indian Navy's ongoing development of Operational Data Framework project, which ingests and stores large volumes of heterogeneous data from multiple sources in their original form. With time, any data lake will progress into a data lakehouse concept, making data governed, queryable, reliable, and directly usable for analytics and decision support. However, the proposed data fabric architecture represents a fundamental shift from the traditional approach. Instead of multiple siloed databases connected through point-to-point APIs with no common metadata, data fabric approach brings all data into one common environment. This is not just a storage system. It is an intelligent, operationally aware data environment needed for LBC AI layer residing above it. The proposed AI services layer is where the bounded AI augmentation advises the commander, operating outside the simulation, not within it. A critical distinction is that layer 1 LBC AI module acts inside the synthetic battle space and generates a game solution, whereas the layer 4 AI module advises outside it and helps the commander solve it. Some of the proposed use cases for layer 4 is as such. During testing, all layer 4 tools may be advisory in nature, but the commander may be given options for AI autonomy. While AI promises enhanced decision speed, realism, and efficiency, its integration must be carefully managed to avoid undermining human judgment machine outputs. This leads to diminished situational awareness, brittleness in novel scenarios, and the danger of unintended escalation. The mitigation is clear. Bounded AI rules with mandatory human veto authority at all critical points. Phased human to AI progression for calibrated trust building, mandatory confirmation points, and continuous training on AI guardrails. Preserve mission command and adaptive thinking. The second risk is data integrity and bias. Inaccurate, biased, or unrepresentative training data, whether incomplete or bad, flawed terrain models, hallucinated adversary behavior, or corrected lessons can propagate systemic errors and fundamentally compromise simulation credibility. The mitigation is a governed data fabric with authoritative baselines, version control repositories, multi-source bias audits, and human-in-the-loop validation at every stage. The third risk is inter-service fragmentation. Without coordinated standards, service-specific simulators, and AI tools, risk remaining isolated with incompatible data formats, no cross-domain synchronization, and weakened joiners. This directly undermines the joint proficiency essential for theater commands. The mitigation lies in the federated architecture itself. HLA and DS compliance may be enforced on all wargame systems operated by the three services. A tri-services steering group under the National Wargame and Data Center is recommended for implementation and overseeing joint systems-based wargame exercises. The fourth risk is institutional trust and ethics. Opaque AI outputs, lack of auditability, bias amplification, and escalation tendencies can erode confidence among commanders and planners, undermining the legitimacy of the entire system. The mitigation centers on transparency and auditability, end-to-end logging of every AI output, red team audits of AI modules, rules of engagement guardrails enforced at every level, and independent validation panels. My key proposals for implementation and adoption across the defense forces are as follows. First, it is proposed that XP-IDS establish a tri-service steering group and establish a joint LBC architecture within the next 12 months. Without a clear integration architecture, interoperability will remain aspirational. Second, the proposed National Wargaming and Data Center NWDC under the aegis of Future Operations and Analysis Group XP-IDS acts as a central hub for joint LBC simulation, federated data governance, and AI augmented wargaming architecture. Each individual services may set up respective AI wargaming labs with the purpose of feeding NWDC with the developed and matured service-specific, ethical, and explainable AI models. Third, build a national scenario repository of at least 15 validated and version-controlled scenarios within 24 months as a shared tri-service resource for operational and strategic wargaming. Fourth, pilot narrow AI use cases beginning with the course of action generation, red cell modeling, and after-action report generation, culminating in the first human versus human-assisted AI joint wargaming within 2 years. Fifth, adopt a governed data fabric architecture as a national standard for wargaming data management, replacing the current siloed point-to-point integration approach. Sixth, mandate HLA and DS compliance for all new service level simulation acquisitions. Interoperability must be built in by design and not retrofitted to enable seamless federation across all of these services. Implement AI-driven constructive layer capabilities across all these services to generate adaptive red force behavior, free all blue forces for realistic training, enabling our forces to truly train the way they fight. And lastly, and the most neglected, invest in in-house service expertise by training a dedicated cadre of AI and data science qualified officers specifically for wargaming within the next 5 years. Borrowed cutting-edge technology without in-house trained manpower will not be a sustainable model. These proposals are structured to deliver early credibility through narrow pilot projects, scale progressively through federation and governance, and ultimately position Indian Defence Forces as a leader in simulation and wargaming domain. I would like to end my talk with the old proverb: the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the next best time is now. On similar lines, I would like to state that the best time to set up AI wargaming labs and integrate all service gaming systems was 10 years ago. The next best time is now. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Thank you, Vishal. With a sound technical background, you have well attempted to sell the idea of creation of a scalable, live, virtual, constructive simulation ecosystem for joint ops scenario involving the latest advanced techniques. The proposal for creation of a national wargaming and data center under Future Ops Analysis Group merits examination. Thank you. And now may I request Goel to present his talk.
Chair, Chief of the Defence Staff, former chiefs, senior officers, distinguished colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen. It is truly a matter of great honor and privilege for me to be able to address this august gathering. The subject before us is not abstractly. It is the requirement of our security environment. We are operating in a world where the lines between war and peace, military and civilian, combatant and non-combatant, are increasingly indistinct. Where war and peace have started to look suspiciously alike. During my talk, I will initially discuss briefly the issues which face us in the contemporary environment, followed by some key attributes of MDO. I will then deliberate over some aspects of domains of MDO, followed by some contradictions to set the ground for my recommendation, about which I will talk in detail. Today, traditional boundaries between war and peace have eroded. Hybrid threats, cyber operations, information campaigns, and dual-use infrastructure have created a persistent grey zone. For India, a large, diverse, rapidly modernizing democracy, success in this environment depends on institutionalized military-civil fusion and robust inter- as well as intra-agency collaboration. India's strategic environment is complex. Our vast population, clear governance, where state governments and central governments may have different priorities. External pressures create both opportunities and vulnerabilities in multi-domain competition. Effective national response requires mechanisms that act swiftly, legally, and with political legitimacy. This calls for structural reforms, doctrinal clarity, capability development, and a massive cultural change to build a unified national response. To put things in perspective, multi-domain operations are not new, and right from Mahabharata to Shivaji, Indians have been long adept at MDO. The terminology has evolved from no war, no peace to grey zone warfare to multi-domain operations, but the essence remains: pursuit of strategic advantage. Historically, the armed forces carried this responsibility. Today, each discipline must secure its own domain, operate within the domain, and be prepared to disrupt the adversary's domain, calibrated undeniably by a national level organization. For example, a specialist of an industrial control system should have the capability to trigger an industrial shutdown. Or hydrology specialists should be able to control river flows. The current geopolitical environment has deepened what may be called as the fog of peace. Multi-domain operations now span the full spectrum of conflict, almost converging the full color palette through a prism into a white continuum, omnipresent, protracted, and uncertain. Without going into many details, I would now highlight 3 of the 6 very key attributes, those highlighted in blue on the slide, of modern competition across multiple domains. MDO is very carefully calibrated on the escalation matrix. Aggressors calibrate and modulate intensity without crossing red lines, or deliberately cross red lines to elicit a strategic response. For example, in the Israeli Music Festival or at Pahalgam, red lines were crossed deliberately to provoke a reaction. It is also pertinent to note that while grey zone operations are often considered instruments of weaker actors, stronger adversaries also employ them effectively to ensure coercive deterrence through show of strength operations in a non-kinetic domain. In addition, grey zone activities may not always remain below the threshold of war. If belligerents possess the capability, such actions can escalate into catastrophic conflict. This reiterates the need for all agencies to recognize that actions in any domains may escalate, and that civilian institutions should be prepared to become instruments of force in active hostilities. Multi-domain operations are cumulative and simultaneous, often overwhelming states with bureaucratic inertia. Activities across multiple domains saddle the decision maker by their effects, who is then unable to take a decision and is generally only reacting. The Vietnam War demonstrated how pressures from families and public opinion shape national decision making. This is the operations in multiple domains at work, where security, politics, and society intersect through cognitive domain. The key point to note here is, if responses are reactive and delayed, the initiative is already lost. Effective interagency coordination reduces friction and accelerates decision cycles. A word about co-expansion of conflict spectrum has blurred distinctions between military and civilian targets. Terrorists embed within civilian population. Cyber attackers exploit dual-use infrastructure, and economic and cyber tools are weaponized by both state and non-state actors. However, to counter these actors, international humanitarian law requires use of proportional force, abiding by which proudly distinguishes the armed forces in the world across all spectrums of conflict. Technology has blurred distinction between tactical, operational, and strategic layers. A tactical drone strike can have strategic consequences, and a single cyber intrusion can ripple across national security. Success in MDO rests on technological advancement. I would even go further to say that the information domain is the one which binds all other domains together. It can also be said easily that our network is our net worth. Today, I can proudly say that through the Network of Spectrum project, the tri-services are on the threshold of being bound together in a common thread of joint venture and convergence. Each day, new domains are added as new battlegrounds, which will have their own doctrines to engage. Merely the consideration of a number of more potential domains for engagement places a country at an advantage over the adversary. I must confess that progress to converge capabilities for MDO is not easy, and the system is fraught with a complex maze of contradictions. I would like to highlight some contradictions before I recommend a few initiatives. While MDO thrives on indirect activities which can avoid direct attribution, militaries, on the other hand, excel at direct action. Democracies, by design, diffuse authority to deliberately avoid concentrating power. This strengthens legitimacy but complicates integration to generate comprehensive national strength. Operations across multiple domains necessitate a whole-of-government approach with selfless disregard to tough issues. Within the security ecosystem, institutions like the NSCS and headquarter ITS exist, but ministries and departments still tend to operate in silos. Intelligence agencies tend to withhold data, and absence of unified command probably delays responses. Inter-domain battles and diffuse control tend to hinder cohesion. While 2611 Mumbai attacks highlighted delays in coordination, Kashmir's present integrated mechanism offers a model for replication nationwide. Another point to note here is that formally, security models involve fewer agencies. Today, internal and external security environments have blurred, requiring synchronization under a grand strategy. Therefore, coordination is not optional. It is the foundation of resilience. I strongly believe that multi-domain operations are continuous operations against a nation, a society, a culture, and its people, requiring unified approach through synergy between all national agencies and organizations. I would deliberate over the recommendations under three broad heads as shown. Firstly, the reforms required at leadership and organizational levels. Further, I will cover the organizational recommendations under the heads given on the slide. While the paper had been written earlier, recent developments in the Middle East conform to some suppositions. I propose national theatrization, with command and control structure at the national level, streamlined under a Ministry of National Security, which can optimize available resources rather than compete with each other by integrating defense, home, external affairs, industry resources, and intelligence, by converging reporting channels, ensuring safeguards, and embedding specialists in its fold. It may be an improvement over the existing NSCS or the National Council, as suggested yesterday by Admiral Sunil Saxena, by having stronger command and control linkages. At the military level, the Office of the Chief of Defence Staff may be empowered further with operational authority over all operational commands. Streamlined verticals can exist at CPS's office for specific fronts or domains to enable jointness, Atmanirbharta, and integration. Such structures would ensure mechanisms that ensure swift and politically legitimate actions during operations. Next, at the regional levels, it is recommended to extrapolate national coordination structures with command and control linkages including military, civilian administration, police, border guarding forces, intelligence, and relevant ministries for each strategic region with clear mandates and authorities. The agencies must jointly coordinate infrastructure development, civilian administration, and security postures. During my command tenure in Eastern Ladakh, I realized that the district administration, police, and local civil society can be the first responders to many gray zone pressures and must be integrated into the MDO plans. As was mentioned by the Chief of Army Staff himself yesterday, I recommend to conduct long-duration, realistic exercises simulating all possible gray zone scenarios with multiple agencies and ministries. A country is known to have conducted these kind of exercises over years and decades, every time losing to the adversary in the exercise, before finally developing a joint and integrated workable plan. At the formation level, MDO war game must be the main war game, rather than being an adjunct to it, with residual combat potential calculated for each MDO action. Intelligence is equally relevant to MDO, and hence there is a requirement to create joint intelligence fusion centers with clear command linkages that integrate civilian, military, and technical intelligence. Union War Book is required to be developed, mapping realistic escalation ladders across diplomatic, economic, informational, legal, and military domains. its effectiveness should be exercised in multi-agency war games and the document progressively refined. Next, the leaders must think across domains, prioritize national interest over institutional turf, and promotions must reward collaborative ability. Service parity and inter-state equivalence between different services and organizations would also encourage collaborative decision making. I would also like to say that artificial differences, which create disparities between status of officers of different cadre vis-a-vis years of service, are one of the biggest impediments to joint collaborative working. So I was in 11th standard in 1999 when a country issued a 50-year vision document for 2049. I was aware of the Indian 5-year plan program, and in my mind then, I remember having disregarded the foreign document as mere propaganda. But the country had not just planned for 50 years hence, but as history would prove, it surpassed its own set timelines. The country, being aware that in 2048, the treaty system that prevents development of Antarctica will expire, is already working towards it. It is probably in our national character to take a short view of time, probably limited to the duration enabled by an individual at an office, thereby creating a lack of continuity in thought and action. There is a requirement to institutionalize long-term continuity beyond individual tenures to avoid personality-driven shifts. For success in MDO, it is required to present unified, deterrent posture to coordinated messaging, economic measures, legal actions, and calibrated military responses to shape perceptions to own advantage. The narrative needs to be jointly conceptualized by highest civilian and military authorities through high degree of collaboration. During Operation Sindoor, multiple national level activities are coordinated right from military action to Indus Water Treaty in perfect synchronization. Coming on to my next set of recommendations about capability development, which will be covered under 3 heads as shown. I strongly believe that most MDO activities are backed by credible military presence, poised for escalation if required. Otherwise, how can some actors get away with these activities while some attract punitive response? Conventional military capability is the bedrock for any activity in MDO, as the aggressor should always be prepared for a conventional military retaliation. India demonstrated this adequately during Operation Sindoor. Appropriate conventional military capability to keep a force in being needs to be built as a deterrent, keeping the overall end state as well as escalation possibility in perspective. Strategic advantage may also be accrued through well-orchestrated, asymmetric, cross-sectoral activities by expanding the domains of MDO. We have seen how blocking sea lines of communication has created a worldwide strategic impact much more than laser missile fires. In addition, critical capabilities like telecommunication, cloud services, satellite imagery, logistics are developed primarily by the private sector, driven by the countries which are global leaders in defense technological innovation, driven by their robust military-civil collaboration, commercialize even military innovations. The innovations are applied in the civilian sector, driving economic growth while strengthening national security. My third set of recommendations are about judicious resource optimization, which will be covered as shown. We need to develop dual-use infrastructure, highways as runways, tunnels as shelters, resilient communication, and distributed supply chain. Such infrastructure should be developed quickly by applying national will, bypassing bureaucratic hurdles, and inviting private firms. Further, we need to extend IT and communication right up to the forward areas to expand the IT advantage to the forward edge. In addition, urban resilience programs to prevent spread of disinformation, protect utilities and public services, and improve social cohesion can become pivotal for rural area security. maritime competition includes fishing disputes, commercial denial strategies, and the use of private maritime actors to assert influence. Indian Navy, Indian Coast Guard, Customs, Fisheries Departments, and Commerce Ministries must synchronize patrols, enforcements, and diplomatic engagements to diversify supply chains, protect critical infrastructure, and deploy targeted economic countermeasures. Blurring of military targets and rise of multi-domain competition represent a strategic reality that will shape India's security environment for decades. In the emerging security paradigm, multi-level and multi-dimensional wargaming is vital. NDO may be an end in itself or a means within a nation's grand strategy. History teaches us that nations which plan in decades prevail. Those that plan in tenures falter. A healthy military-civil relationship is essential and demands a paradigm shift in inter- and intra-agency collaboration for institutional reforms, trust building, and integrated governance. Thus, India will be better positioned to tackle aggression, manage crises, and shape a regional order in an era where the lines between war and peace are deliberately blurred. The task before us is to institutionalize continuity, coherence, and collaboration so that India not only navigates the grey zone but shapes it to her advantage. In the end, I would just like to thank the audience and organizers for having given me a chance to express my views at this prestigious forum. Thank you. Team Focus, Jai Hind.
May I compliment you, Ankush, for presenting a vibrant and thought-provoking study on furtherance of NDA concept and to achieve civil-military fusion towards addressing the national security interests. I must also acknowledge that you have succinctly highlighted the complex maze of contradictions, mainly with the focus impetus on synergy, on achieving synergy between all the national agencies. Sir, we have about 14 minutes. If you could. Yes, sir. We have 10 till 10:30, so 14 minutes, sir. It's still 1030, sir. So before the house is open for Q&A, the rules of the game remains unchanged. The person immediately asking the question may identify itself, short, brief question, and one question at a time. And we will take three in a round. We'll take three questions, and you may identify the speaker to whom the question is addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm Major Abhinay. My question is to UPSP. It's a great thought-provoking presentation, and the issue of domains that you cover, I agree with you, subsurface would become a domain and Chinese will be the first to go there, but not including the cyberspace and electromagnetic spectrum also as a domain. Probably, I just wanted to give a comment on that. The fact is we live in an imperfect world. In a utopian construct, it would work the way you have articulated. The functional things that are more important. But this was tried, and probably the Chinese failed when they set up the strategic support force. They found that the domains needed to be given that additional impetus, and therefore now they've made cyberspace and electromagnetic spectrum, which is called ISF, as three different domains. And that is what the Americans have also gone. I think to give the specialization, the due, the domains need to be constructed. So that is one point which I want to make. My question is, sir, I'll just take 2-3 minutes. My other point which I wanted to highlight is that from theoretical concepts, we need to move to organizational force.
two questions in this. I will just address the domain parts before I hand over to Israel. The six domains. The domain is something which the space, it's a space where you want to influence. Yesterday also the discussion happened on the nuclear aspect of society, the EM dimensions. You look at what these effects affect this space in which you are looking at. If a nuclear domain is there, that is influencing the cognitive domain. If it is an EM, this thing is addressing the physical aspects. So domains are where you influence the space. That is important.
I'll try to answer it in a very simple manner, sir. A domain, if you analyze it, there are two issues to it. One, we take the literal meaning of domain, which could be in the social science domain. Anything is a domain. It is an area of influence. But as a warfare practitioner, when we are talking about domain, we should not be obsessed with this word, saying that every aspect is a domain. Domain, as I described in my presentation, that there has to be some definition to it. Because the biggest problem is that if we do not adhere to a definition and start calling everything a domain, every service, every core, every branch, every tentacle of warfighter would like themselves to be called as a domain. So, idea, whatever I presented is that we need to define boundaries and restrict it. Second is about the organizational force. They actually brought out the concept of MDO, which was initiated by US in 2015 and first time written through a doctrine. That was by US Army countering Russia and China in an expeditionary role, and there they want to have everything on. Somehow our understanding of domain is that I want to do everything right from subsurface to space, which I cannot as individual service. I have to restrict to my core competencies and be into that. I should not step to other domains. So there is no point of creating a domain force. Whereas what I want to create is that as an air warrior practitioner, do I have adequate understanding of the land forces operations and the sea operations and subsea operations? If as a warfare air power practitioner, air power commander, if I appreciate that and undertake the operations, that is the multi-domain operation. It is not that I step into your shoes and you step into mine. That is my understanding of it.
So your aspect regarding the public-private partnership is absolutely most given, sir. Even the public sector and the private sector both need to step up their game so that we can really constitute a whole of nation approach. That point is very well taken, so we need to move towards it. A very quick point, sir, I would like to make regarding the domains as well. In my view, I believe that more the number of domains, more the advantage it is. Of course, one should not be stepping out of two toes, etc. A simple analogy I will give is a cricket team which only understands batting and bowling as domains versus another team which considers fielding also as a domain. So it has a specialization built into it and may perform better than the other team. So this is my point.
Thank you. I'm secondly retired from the Navy. Captain is missing. While I understand the symbolism of say 2047 for India or 2049 for China, a suggestion sort of keeps coming up, or a feeling keeps coming up that transformation also has a completion date or an achievement date, which probably is wrong because transformation is a continuous process. So we cannot say we want to transform by 2047 or something. Some small objectives can have achievement dates, but transformation itself, I would suggest, is a rolling. It's a constant thing. And a lot of studies have come out that China will be transformatized, by the PLA will transform itself or transformatize itself. They use an upward term. Some say 2027, 2035, 2049, etc. So I think there might be a trap here, which we should perhaps be careful about your space.
I totally agree to this. Since my younger days, every 8th October, it always used to say that Indian Air Force is under transformation. And today in 2026, when they are defining the Defense Vision 2047, they are still saying that another 10 years is required for transformation. Transformation is an ongoing process. There cannot be a set deadline. But point here is that when do we want to excel?
execution of 100th Carl 2047, except by 2047. But point here is that we have to speed up with relation to our adversaries. Where every year, tomorrow Pakistan individual will be going to space, and shall we wait for 2047 for our military things to? No, we cannot. So that is my general perception. I may be wrong in the overall thing, but we need to speed up. That's my view.
Sir, my name is Captain Kelvin.
Good to have different views. When you think about domain, in the general here, a domain is a space in which you can maneuver to create effects. So, before 1957, space always existed. But it was not a domain as such because the Sputnik had not gone. You couldn't maneuver. Thereafter, you could maneuver and create effects, and hence space became a domain. So the point is, we have to be very clear, and I personally, can you maneuver in the electromagnetic spectrum? Can you do that in the cyber spectrum? And in the cognitive spectrum, you start influencing leaders by steps and maneuver in the cognitive domain. And I think it's a domain. So I personally feel that cyber, electromagnetic spectrum, and cognitive are domains. And I don't think we should have as many domains as required. That would be trivializing it.
Sir, Group Captain Bahadur, please. So I'm Group Captain Kelvin. I'm from Air Force Academy. My question will be very brief. In the concept of multi-domain operations, I perceive the civilian sector will be almost a part of 60-40. Will it be appropriate that we include the civilian representatives in the future SAMWADs? Example could be Indian Railways, Civil Aviation, Central Armed Police Forces, Civil Defense.
As your desired proposal, it will be examined as normal way.
Sir, I'm beginning personal attending the NTCs from rural levels. I started this process of examining the role of artificial intelligence into training thanks to College of Defense Management. I went into examining how AI can train the armed forces better, went into simulations and war games. It was in 2021. I was not aware of the tremendous work being done by this job. From there, once I started getting feedback from the environment, just getting in the environment reality part after posing the question to this job. The first set of feedbacks came in that we are trying to propose that we are trying to make chocolate soldiers. The status of training simulators in the army per se, wherein they just kept for accounting purpose and not being used. Then came in a set of simulators like what is coming in from Zen. Simulators are good, but when you've done something else for the item inspection, your backside gets exposed. As in what's actual training gets exposed to the environment. These such challenges are there. Then somebody comes and challenges that DAY-2 comes up with some new set of simulations of wargaming software, and that is forced down upon us. These are the feedbacks from the environment or the environment reality per se. When we actually start getting into a model, I'm an infantry officer as a 4-pointer from India. Once we start training our question, the main point is if we have to start training our models, we need training data sets. Each of the war games, we discuss stuff, we record stuff, we delete stuff, we keep some stuff for posterity. Now, which of this particular data sets, which of these learnings are we going to preserve to train our data sets which Speaker 2 is trying to set up? I mean, complete agreement, we need it, that's need of power as of 10 years back. But what sort of data sets are we going to preserve, train for our future, and how the security is going to be ensured? That's major points.
Sean, you could cover also what we are looking at in the ODF, how we are setting up the data sets.
Yes, sir. So when you look at data sets, it starts with data warehouse, where you have structured data, quality data set. But when you look at data lake, what the lake is trying to do is that all unstructured data, whatever format, it can just be dumped. And when you have data warehouse residing, automatically it gives the quality. But what from there, what I am proposing is that we should have something like data fabric structure where there's something like active metadata. Automatically, it will be able to understand the data. It has an intelligent layer on top of it. It is like all these different databases are connected through an intelligent system. So it automatically the problem gets resolved here. So the main, as far as your question is concerned, from the paper, what I'm trying to propose is that we should have a federated layer in which your different architecture are able to connect to each other even though you're autonomous. So that is what solves your problem, sir.
No, a small comparison, let's take a given concern. DG Resi is here, Ayman Patania. You could interact with this thing, and genuine concern that could be addressed directly. Sir, with your permission, that will Luthra Singh would like to ask one. You can allow one more. Thank you. My brief question is related to the subject and the discussion that is doctrines, war game, and simulation. In both the federated model and the first model the layer that you indicated, while connecting these grids is important, how do you figure out the impact of interaction of different domains? Because different domains will create impacts, and those impacts will lead to your further planning and action, etc. So it is not just linking them, it is also seeing the impact of action in one domain leading to your actions. And subsequently, creating through the doctrine what it means, how do we create action, reaction, counteraction chain? Because you might wait for surprises as you start implementing, as you start running a show, you may wait for surprising. So you have to, how do you incorporate this action, reaction, counteraction chain? Thank you.
Sir, what I'm proposing is that we need to have AI layer, conceptual layer. That is what enables us to give you the solution when you interact in multi-domain operations. That is the unique proposal that I have, sir. So what I'm proposing is that the services should have their own systems, autonomous system, play in your own unique environment, have your own AI use cases, play the way you want, but through federated architecture, we are able to talk to each system. Plus, in the first layer, the LBC layer, you only have an AI layer, it helps you. And when you're connecting different systems, you also have in layer for the AI service layer. And that is how you are able to focus various effects between the services. Ultimately, sir, it will be very complex in scale, it will be highly complex. So what I'm proposing is that initially the complete autonomy should be with the commander, but as the complexity progresses, it's a war-gaming simulation. So we have the leeway to slowly give the autonomy to the AI up to the point of the lethal kill chain of to fire and not to fire should rest with the commander. That is my proposal, it should never be taken. And as it is a war game and a simulation, we can private base structure. But the bottom line is that play the way you're playing, sir, the federated architecture with the AI conceptual layer will take care of it, sir. As far as doctrine training concerned, the most important thing is that you should be able to train your team, the officers and sailors men, that how to use the AI use cases. If it is giving you decision, are you ready to do it? That means you should have trust, you should have already validated the AI models, all these things should happen. You should know how to run a war game which is AI capable in the first layer and the fourth layer.